All right, well, thank you so much for coming today to the Conservation Education Lunch and Learn webinar. Today we have a really exciting subject, talking all about the Wildlife Viewer Survey. So we're going to be talking about wildlife viewing and how people engage with wildlife, both consumptive and non-consumptive, and how we can engage with all people interested in engaging with wildlife and see how they can help participate in our conservation practices. So just as we move forward, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker here in a minute. And before I do that, I just want you to know that I am recording today. So this will be available afterwards on YouTube. I'll send this out. I'll also send any kind of resource that Olivia speaks of today. I'll be sending it out in an email so you can have that as well as with an evaluation. If you have any questions today, please put them in the chat. My name is Amber Schultz. I'm the Assistant Division Administrator of the Fish and Wildlife Education Division at Nebraska Game and Parks, and I host this series monthly with the intention of just bringing together really cool content and conversations and discussions around subjects around conservation and education. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker today. Please help me welcome Olivia DaRugna. She's a Watchable wildlife biologist with Nebraska Game and Parks, and she's coming to us from the Panhandle in Nebraska today. So she's out in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and she is part of the working group, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies Wildlife Viewing and Nature Tourism Working Group, which is a national working group that has helped kind of structure this really important survey. So she'll be able to answer these questions today and hopefully open up a really great discussion. So again, if you have questions, put them in the chat. I will monitor. I'm sure we'll also have time at the end to have more questions for Olivia. But Olivia, go ahead and get started.
All righty. Thank you, Amber, for having me here. And today we're going to talk about the National Wildlife Viewer Survey that was completed last year. The survey went out in 2021, but this survey went out all across the U.S. and it's to help state agencies better understand wildlife viewers in their states. Most of this talk is reporting on the results. I'm hoping Game and Parks staff, as well as others, can find some good takeaways from this. And so some of the big takeaways I hope you get out of this talk is wildlife viewing is really growing across the country, but also in Nebraska. And we need to reach this audience and build that connection with them through wildlife viewing resources and opportunities, and give wildlife viewers avenues to financially support their state agencies through existing and possibly new mechanisms. So what is wildlife watching? Well, they defined it as closely observing, feeding, and photographing wildlife, visiting parks or natural areas to observe, feed, or photograph wildlife, maintaining plantings in natural areas for the benefit of wildlife. So there was a study done in 2016 that surveyed recreationists, and it found that about a third of adults participated in wildlife viewing. And this grew by 34% from 2011 to 2016. So these are the latest numbers in this national survey. And as you can see, that was 2016. There should be new results out with the latest wildlife viewing survey in 2022 or in this summer. So, but the big thing here is just recognizing like there is this huge increase in wildlife viewing across the country. And the primary wildlife viewing was done around the home. So while hunting is a strong base for our state agencies, there's also this desire to build out that constituency to wildlife viewers. And they provide this great opportunity to do so, given these large numbers and this increase in wildlife viewing that we're seeing. So in Nebraska, outdoor recreation drives nearly $4 billion in revenue. Hunting provided over $1.5 billion in revenues, with 185 certified hunters. This included both in-state and out-of-state hunters. Angling had 550 million in revenue with 266,000 anglers. Parks had nearly 770 million in revenue with 508,000 park permits sold. And that was just last year. Wildlife viewing in our state generated over $1 billion in revenue last year, but we don't really know who our wildlife viewers are. And it's really difficult to track because we don't have a permit system like we do for these other recreational activities. There was a survey done in 2021 by Nebraska Game and Parks and the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and they surveyed 4,000 park guests to Nebraska state parks. And so they found from these respondents that wildlife viewing and scenery viewing was one of the most popular activities. And they also found that 81% of the respondents were Nebraska residents. So we know that Nebraska wildlife viewing is important based on this survey and the economic impact that we found. And it just so happens that there was a national survey done that directly relates to wildlife viewing across the country and within the different regions of our country. And the results are directly how it relates to state agencies. So this national survey was done by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies and Virginia Tech Fish and Wildlife Conservation. And this was a national survey that was put out, and it was organized through our Wildlife Viewing and Nature Tourism Working Group. You can find more information on this survey, and we'll link to it at the end of this presentation. But a huge shout out to Dr. Ashley Dayer, Emily Sinkular, and Shelley Platt, who really organized and put this survey together, analyzed the results, and put together some of the information that we'll see in the next few slides. So why should we focus on wildlife viewers? Well, as we saw, they are growing in numbers across the country and even within our states. And they have a potential to provide influence. Our viewers are difficult for agencies to reach. There is a lack of information on viewers, their thoughts, their preferences, their behaviors. And so to better serve wildlife viewers and communicate with them more, we need to gather more information so we know who our audience is. And we need to connect with them so that, we're building this familiarity and building this support system. So maybe they'll want to contribute financially to our state agencies and conservation efforts. So this large-scale online survey went out through a company called Qualtrics. And the survey was done between August and September 2021. There was a screening question so that it eliminated anybody that didn't view wildlife. They weren't required to answer any more questions, and they were eliminated from the results that we'll see on the next few slides. They were closed-ended questions so that it's easy to analyze. And we asked folks these survey questions from all across the country, and we tried to keep the survey under 15 minutes. So some of the information that was collected, there's quite a bit. So we got information on their demographics, their duration, location, and frequency of participating in wildlife viewing, their participation in other outdoor recreation activities, how specified they were with wildlife viewing, what kind of money they were spending on this activity, and familiarity with their state agencies, experience with their state agency programs, their past and future financial contributions to state wildlife agencies, and then their preferred forms of viewing support and communication. The respondents were evenly distributed across the country. So you'll notice here that Nebraska is in the Midwest. And as we go along, I'll report some of the Midwest specific numbers, as these were sometimes significantly different from the national results. So you see here that they were pretty evenly distributed across the country with a little over 4,000 respondents. So moving on to the results of this survey. So the screening question that was asked was, in which, if any of the following forms of wildlife viewing have you participated in the past 5 years? So if someone answered that they participate in wildlife viewing in the past 5 years, they continued on to the rest of the survey questions. However, if they did not participate in any forms of wildlife viewing, they were eliminated from the survey. So of those that had participated in wildlife viewing in the last 5 years, going over some of the demographic results, almost half were 55 years or older. And then about 58% were a man, 41% were a woman, and less than 1% considered themselves other. So 18% of the respondents identified as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. One thing to note here is that this was underrepresented of the national population, which was 42% Black, Indigenous, or people of color. But there are opportunities here to broaden that audience. Nearly half of the respondents reported that they made less than $50,000, while 21% reported that they had a household income of $100,000 or more. And then focusing here on where our respondents lived, if we look at the Midwest, which is the light blue color in the middle, nearly 35% of them live in urban areas, while the rest of them live in small cities to rural areas. So moving on to our wildlife viewing behaviors. The survey found that most of the respondents preferred to view birds and land mammals. These were by far the most popular type of wildlife to view. But if we look at the Midwest, there are some differences here, especially with those birds and land mammals. Those are a little bit higher. And then moving down to marine mammals, fish, reptiles, amphibians, and insects. So even though birds and land mammals are the most popular type of wildlife to view, we can't discredit all these other types of wildlife because lots of people like to view these other types as well. In regards to the different wildlife viewing activities, so 76% of respondents selected that they participated in more than one activity. Nearly 60% of the respondents in the Midwest preferred feeding wild birds, and over 50% of those in the Midwest also like to visit parks and natural areas. And this was closely followed by photographing wildlife viewing. So the majority of respondents did consider themselves beginning to novice wildlife viewers. And this was followed by intermediate skill level at 30%. And then less than 12% considered themselves advanced or expert wildlife viewers. So this is important to remember as we start to develop programs and services for wildlife viewers, that the majority of our audience is going to be these beginning to intermediate skill level. And then if we look at some potential barriers to participation, the survey found that distance to viewing locations was the largest barrier that contributed to people participating in wildlife viewing, and then followed by financial cost and lack of free time. 75% of the respondents reported viewing wildlife in more than one location. And so the majority of people prefer to or participate in wildlife viewing around their home. So about 75% of them were participating at their home. And this was followed by viewing wildlife at state managed areas as well as locally managed areas. About 86% of the respondents viewed wildlife away from their home for at least one day in a typical year. Of this, 18% spend 31 to 60 days viewing wildlife away from their home. So this is about 3 to 5 days per month. So keeping this in mind that, a majority of wildlife viewers at least spend one day away from their home, which could be at these state or locally managed areas. And then about 42% don't spend time viewing wildlife outside their state or their country. So this kind of ties in with that Nebraska Park Survey that found 81% of the respondents were mostly Nebraska residents. So a lot of people are not traveling outside of their state to view wildlife. So trying to focus on those in-state wildlife viewers could be a key audience and promotion opportunity. So recent research has demonstrated that many wildlife recreationists participate in multiple forms of outdoor recreation, and that may include both consumptive activities like angling and hunting, but it could also be non-consumptive activities like wildlife viewing. And so this survey asked a question if they participated in fishing or hunting in the past 5 years. If they did, they were considered consumptive wildlife viewers. And if they did not, they were considered non-consumptive wildlife viewers. And interestingly, there was a large overlap with consumptive and non-consumptive activities. So 46% of the wildlife viewers surveyed participated in both. So we find that almost 30% were angling and viewing wildlife, 3% were hunting and viewing wildlife, and then 14% were angling, hunting, and viewing wildlife, while another 54% only viewed wildlife. So the survey looked at wildlife viewers' familiarity with fish and wildlife agencies. And as state agencies try to increase their engagement with this broader constituency like wildlife viewers, familiarity may serve as an important metric for measuring the wildlife viewers' relationships with state agencies and their likelihood to provide financial support to these state agencies in their conservation efforts. So keeping this in mind, they wanted to test the difference in familiarity between the consumptive and non-consumptive viewers. And they found that consumptive wildlife viewers were significantly more familiar with their state wildlife and fish agencies than non-consumptive viewers were. Nearly 70% of consumptive viewers were moderately to extremely familiar, while only 44% of non-consumptive viewers were moderately to extremely familiar with their state agencies. And this could be due to the fact that hunters and anglers have more interactions with their state agencies due to permitting and licenses and regulations. The survey further evaluated respondents' perceptions of state agencies by examining how wildlife viewers perceive the level of prioritization state agencies place on programs and services that support wildlife viewing. There was a significant difference, again, comparing those non-consumptive viewers to the consumptive viewers. So 56% of non-consumptive users thought that state agencies did not prioritize programs or services that support wildlife viewing. And 31% of consumptive viewers thought the same thing. So findings from this study and research published elsewhere indicate that interest in wildlife viewing could be a nice common ground for wildlife recreationists. So I know this was a lot of results and we kind of went through those fast. So what do these results mean? The survey panel did come up with these recommendations based on the results for state agencies. So develop programs for and engage with wildlife viewers, broaden constituency to wildlife viewers, develop opportunities for viewers to financially support agencies, and then supporting agencies in implementing these results, and the Virginia Tech and Association of Fish and Wildlife Service is going to conduct future research as well. So going back to that first recommendation, engaging with wildlife viewers, this does require that we understand what programs and services wildlife viewers prefer. And so one of the questions that was asked was, what would you like to see from your state agencies? And so the results were more information on the wildlife that occurs in their state, more information about where to view and when to view wildlife, as well as access to more places to view wildlife. And this kind of goes in line with remembering that beginning to intermediate audience of wildlife watchers. So giving them this information that they need to get out there and find the wildlife within their state. So if we prioritize these preferred programs and information, we may be able to help increase the familiarity between wildlife viewers and state agencies. So how do we make sure that we're getting this information out there? Well, the survey did ask the preferred communication method for this type of information, and they found that agency websites were the preferred communication method, followed by printed materials, and then email and Facebook. So there's a lot of digital options here, but again, almost half of the respondents still want that printed information. So as agencies continue to develop programs to engage viewers, it's really important to keep in mind that the majority of the wildlife viewers are those beginning to intermediate viewers, and they do prefer viewing around their homes. But they also get outside and want to view wildlife at least 1 to 30 days per year. And this is likely going to be at our state or locally managed lands. So one of the first things to consider is how do we increase our familiarity with this growing audience? And one of the big questions that we often get is, with wildlife viewers, how can they financially support state agencies so that we can support wildlife viewers and the wildlife they want to see? So this survey did ask wildlife viewers, how would they prefer to support their state agencies in the conservation work? And they did find that there is a large appetite. Wildlife viewers do want to support their agencies. They're just not exactly sure how, or they're not aware of those funding avenues. So when it came to non-voluntary contribution methods, the survey found that 55% are likely to purchase a land access pass, so like our state park permits, in the next 5 years, as well as a fishing license. They're willing, a little less than half are willing to pay for program fees or an event, and 47% are likely to purchase a conservation or habitat stamp. When it comes to non-voluntary options, tangible products. So having t-shirts with our brand or other tangible products is a preferred method, as well as conservation lottery tickets. So having a lottery system that goes to conservation of wildlife in our state, state income tax donations or direct donations, and then conservation license plates. So Nebraska does offer many of these methods, but we could consider working on promoting these to our wildlife viewers. We're thinking creatively about some other options that wildlife viewers could potentially financially support our agency and conservation efforts. So we are attempting to bridge this gap and broaden our constituency to wildlife viewers. And we are providing more resources and viewing opportunities in our state. Some of these do include the Nebraska Birding Guide website, which focuses on birding opportunities for those beginning to intermediate birders. We provide a lot of educational programs like the City Nature Challenge, park programs like Marsh Madness that's going on now. I'm trying to connect those at-home wildlife viewers through bird nest cams. And then we do have great communications through our emails, social media, blogs, and magazine articles about where and when to view wildlife. And then we also do have our Wildlife Conservation Fund, where people can donate online through the state income tax, as well as purchasing one of the Wildlife Conservation Fund license plates. So we are, we provide a lot of this infrastructure and mechanisms, but we are only scratching the surface, and there's always more work to be done to build that connection with our wildlife viewers and provide them the information and opportunities they're seeking. But it does take all of us to do this. And so with that, some of the biggest takeaways from this survey is there is a growing user base of wildlife viewers across the country and in Nebraska. Not all of them are different from the hunters and anglers we're already connecting with, but even those consumptive users want to also see more wildlife viewing opportunities and programs from their state agencies. Many wildlife viewers also want to financially support their state agencies and the wildlife that they like to watch. So reminding them of the avenues that currently exist, as well as kind of brainstorming some new opportunities for them to financially contribute. And then, while Nebraska has a lot of infrastructure in place for our wildlife viewers, it is important to remember our audience and continue to build that familiarity with this growing group of users. And with that, I'll take any questions. That I will say this survey has a lot of information in it. I only provided some of the results, but I highly recommend, if you have time, to check it out and read through it and glean more information that you can from it.
Thank you so much, Olivia. That was excellent. I know we had one question, and maybe people will be thinking about questions right now because I know we have some time. But one of the questions from Paula was, and this was earlier on, are there any numbers specific to Nebraska crane migration?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm sure there are. I don't have those in front of me right now or off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to reach out to you.
Yeah, so I just kind of looked a little bit because I know there was some things, stats on that from Nebraska tourism. And I saw an article that spoke to about, there's usually about 30,000 annual visitors to the site to look at the cranes. So.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And then Marina asked if you can link the survey in the chat. And so if you're able to do that, that would be great, Olivia. Otherwise, also I will I'll be sending that out as well in a post email with the recording. I have a question for you while we're thinking about some questions that this kind of stirs. One of the things I noticed is that, and I can't remember the stat, but it seemed like a majority of the wildlife viewers are engaging with wildlife viewing, not leaving too far from their home. That was something that stood out to me. They're going to their parks and they're going to other natural spaces, but a big part was they like to do it right around their home. And knowing that, and also knowing that like about nearly 60 to 70% of Nebraskans do live in urban populations at this point, what would you say from this this survey would be a recommendation on engaging our urban audiences? How can we do that and be relevant to our urban audiences with those two stats?
Yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, about a third live in urban areas in the Midwest, and there is that barrier, that distance to viewing location barrier. And so, when you're thinking about putting on programs, thinking about putting on wildlife viewing programs around those different communities in those urban sites, or, I know the pandemic, there was a lot of virtual opportunities as well. But really, going to those communities and providing wildlife viewing opportunities like the City Nature Challenge is a great example. You're getting people to see the wildlife that's occurring around their areas. With a lot of our state parks and state recreation areas, they're really not too far from communities, whether it's an urban center or even a small city or a town. So connecting with those communities, promoting your wildlife viewing opportunities to your local area, I think is a really important thing to do.
That's good. Thanks, Olivia. Paula, I saw your question. What cities in Nebraska do the City Nature Challenge, not Hastings? How can I volunteer? I can speak to that a little bit. The City Nature Challenge is coordinated on our agency's behalf statewide by Allie Mays, who's in our Fish and Wildlife Education Division. And she works with city coordinators across the state to get this incredible program going. So I know, Olivia, you're a coordinator out at Scottsbluff. This year it's going to be in Scottsbluff, Lincoln, Omaha, Norfolk, North Platte. And I think that's it this year. Am I missing one, Olivia?
I think that's it.
But Paula, if you're interested in participating in that in the future, definitely reach out to us, and then we can work. Allie Mays will work with you, and as that statewide coordinator of this important program, she can. It would be great. I'm sure she would be thrilled if someone wants to do it in Hastings. So I can get you that contact, Paula. And then Nick said, did the survey have any data on viewing wildlife in photos or video?
Like
nature documentary?
Digitally?
Is that maybe what he was asking?
Yeah, I kind of was thinking, I have seen research about people who aren't able to get out into wilderness and see that wildlife, if there's preferences on, what they are viewing via nature documentary or even just social media content and things like that.
That's a great question. This survey, although it covered a lot of content, it did not ask that question.
Okay, no worries. Just wanted to check.
Yeah. But yeah, maybe it's still the same as the other wildlife viewing, that preferred animals like the birds, the land mammals. But that was not specifically asked, so I don't have an answer for you.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. Yeah, no, I think what's on here is still really valuable. So thanks.
Good question, Nick. Olivia, what's kind of upcoming and what's next for these surveys and these results? What's in the future to move this conversation forward, maybe both for the nation and then for Nebraska specifically? What do you envision?
Yeah, so this working group is still meeting monthly, and they are starting phase 2 of this survey, which is community of practice. So how do you implement these results into your own state? And so This phase 2 has just started, and so we're still brainstorming each state on what it is they want to focus on based on those recommendations that they laid out. And so in Nebraska, we're thinking about what's some programming, a new program that we could offer for wildlife viewers to engage with this broader constituency.
Excellent. I'm so glad you're part of that and
Yeah.
representing our agency. Thanks, Olivia. Tobin asked, you made mention several times of state parks. I think the best viewing in our state wildlife management areas. Most have fewer amenities. How do we get our novices to explore those areas? What are the challenges there? What's your take on that?
That's a great question. So like you mentioned, Tobin, there are few amenities. And so wildlife management areas are great for viewing wildlife, and one of my favorite places to go to view wildlife. But we also don't want people to go there expecting accommodations and amenities that don't exist. So making people aware of the viewing opportunities that exist at these wildlife management areas, but also making sure they're aware of, it might just be a parking area. So it might require hiking, but there might not be bathrooms there. So just, and providing when and what type of wildlife could be viewed at these different management areas could be a good resource to provide.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or thoughts?
And if you have any other questions that come to you, feel free to write down my email and reach out to me anytime.
Yeah, excellent. And maybe I'm curious for you, Olivia, and anyone else who wants to chime in on the chat, did any of these results surprise you? Something that you weren't expecting? Olivia, you too as well, if you the question's to you, but to anybody, I guess.
Yeah, for me, I think it was really encouraging to see how many anglers and hunters also participate in wildlife viewing, and how, often sometimes we look at them as two different audiences, but, we could start connecting with our wildlife viewers through the people and that we're already engaging with. So those anglers and those hunters, and listening to them, what kind of wildlife they like to view, where they like to view, what they want to see, is really fascinating to me.
Yeah, and Aaron said many more people are wildlife viewers than I expected, and I agree. And then I'm curious if there's discussion in this working group, in this survey, is there a clear dichotomy between wildlife viewing specifically, or a more holistic people just wanting to be out in natural outdoor spaces, to be near nature? Because I'm thinking about like reflecting my own experiences and the experiences of people I talk to, and we hope to see a critter often, but the biggest motivation, at least for me, is just to be outside and be in natural spaces, whether that's at a state park, a WMA, or anything. Is that parsed out in this survey, or is it just specifically species, specific, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so if they were answering, if they were taking this survey, I would think that most that are hoping to see wildlife and being in nature would have responded as such, that they have viewed wildlife in the past 5 years. And so we would be collecting information under that. Now, it wasn't parsed out, how much people want to just spend in nature and not view wildlife. So, if
Maybe that's a motivation question. What's the motivation
Yeah.
for wildlife watching? is it I just need to see this bird, or is it it's a way to get outside? Maybe that's
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Olivia, and thanks so much for everyone participating today, and thank you for your questions. I will send out an evaluation for this, as well as the link for the survey and any other resources she mentioned. Oh, Jim had a comment, said, "Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Olivia, for the presentation. The results do not surprise me. I participate in numerous viewing opportunities around the state and visit with many participants. The audience is large, and many of them are beginner or novice." Yeah, I agree.
That's
I
awesome.
think that's a really important message, at least for people who work in agencies and we have this kind of bubble, to remember our audience who we're trying to reach it can be very novice. So thanks for that, Jim. Is this the link to the survey results, Olivia?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sending that. All right. Well, thank you so much for participating today. We'll see you next month for the next Lunch and Learn. It'll be about community science with Allie Mays. Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.